Hi, everybody, and welcome. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you and get our PowerPoint presentation loaded and ready to go here. Yeah. Welcome. I am happy to have the opportunity to share with you the results of our research. We explored the use of learning contracts as a way to promote student success in online doctoral programs. My name is Dr. Melanie Shaw, and I conducted this research in collaboration with several colleagues, and two of them, Mina Close and Scott Burris, are co-presenters with me, and so I'm honored to have the opportunity to share this research on our behalf for all of you for the TLC conference. So we started this research with a sample population of over 200 students. These students were considered at risk, and the ways that we identified these students as at risk is they had to meet several criteria. Of those criteria, we had to ensure that they had a high number of dissertation courses that they had participated in, that they were close to their maximum time to completion. In this case, we allowed students 10 years to complete, so they had to be within a year to that maximum time to completion before dismissal to be eligible to participate in this special program that we developed. We also ensured that students did not yet have an approved dissertation proposal. So these were students who were still in the early pre-chapters 1 through 3 approval of their research. We identified that as an institution, we had some liability pertaining to these students. We'd let these students persist in the program despite these at-risk indicators. And so we identified that we did need to create for these students a special program to help provide them with the support that they likely needed to help them be successful. When we began searching approaches to support at-risk doctoral students, in the literature, one of the things that we identified was that learning contracts had been used successfully in a variety of contexts to support student success and also as a tool for mutual understanding. So as the students were invited to participate in this program, we required that they completed a learning contract that was a year-long contract that stipulated the specific milestones that they would complete in that year time frame. What we knew is that while learning contracts had proven successful in a variety of settings from K through 12 up through post-secondary, we didn't have any research on the use of learning contracts with doctoral students at this dissertation phase of the program. So there was a little bit of an unknown variable. However, we were feeling confident that that learning contract would clearly lay out the expectations that we had for the students and also help the students with time management in terms of a commitment that they were making to complete the journey within a year with the specialized support that we were giving them. What we did was that we deconstructed the students' existing dissertation committee. We hired a cadre of special trained, high-touch dissertation chairs who agreed to work with each of these students for at least for 4 hours a week over the course of the year. They could be assigned up to 10 students, but that was the maximum load. So this was like a full-time contracted position for these specialized faculty. We had them identify in the learning contract when they would meet the various milestones. In this case, we had a concept paper, which was like the prospectus. We had the dissertation proposal, chapters 1 through 3. We had the IRB, application approval. We had the dissertation manuscript, so chapters 1 through 5, and then the final dissertation defense. So we assigned them to that single chairperson. We also gave them one other committee member, and that committee member was standardized across all of these students, and that person served as a methodological generalist who could provide just a high-level overview, an additional sort of fresh set of eyes to support each of these students' progress. The research questions that guided the study that we conducted around this were, what is the mean time to completion for each dissertation milestone when students have signed a learning contract? And then we wanted to know what percentage of those students were successful in completing their doctoral degree. And then if there were any factors that predicted student success with these learning contract specific students. So we used a quantitative approach to this particular study where we explored the milestone completion, degree completion, and then of course we used a logistic regression to determine if there were any of those predictors for student success. So we tracked all 212 students over, it ended up being almost a 2-year period. Some students, because of extenuating circumstances, emergencies, hospitalizations, and so forth, ended up working a little bit longer than their year-long contract, and we allowed for some of that. So we gathered the data over the longitudinal time period for this entire program. We also created a questionnaire for a qualitative component to gather some additional information from these students. And of those 212, 135 of them responded to the questionnaire. And we asked things like demographic factors, satisfaction with the program, and some specifics around the learning contract. So we got some good qualitative and quantitative data from that. Let's see. I'll get to the specifics of some of the things that we got to in just a little bit. So the questionnaire was distributed to all students, and we wanted to figure out what was most supportive of these particular students based on this program. And while we did have some students who withdrew, you can see here that the majority of students were able to successfully persist through the process. And you can see here that we had a total of 97 students who completed their concept paper milestone. The mean completion time was 91 days for that particular milestone, with a standard deviation of 65 days. We had a total of 134 students who completed their dissertation proposal, and the mean completion time was 91 days with a standard deviation of 68 days for that group. And 132 students had completed their dissertation manuscript with the mean time to completion being 182 days with a standard deviation of 69 days. So here's an interesting point. For students who we tracked who completed every single one of those milestones, the total mean time to completion was 316 days with a standard deviation of 76 days. So within just about a year's time, the students who came in having none of these milestones to complete took just under a year to complete their process. 62% of students with learning contracts completed their doctoral degrees. And at the time that we actually did this research, there were still 46 active students who were left to complete. In the end, looking back retrospectively now, 82% of the students who participated in this program completed. Now, our typical completion rate hovers somewhere between 46 to 50% completion. Now, knowing that these were the most at-risk students, these are the ones who had not been successful, who were absolutely not going to, they were going to be ABD, they were absolutely not going to complete, to know that 82% of that most at-risk group completed is a pretty remarkable testament to the power of learning contracts and high-touch mentoring. Of the group, we offered 5 students who decided they could not persist and complete. We offered them master's degrees. So we had an alternative for the students if they were not successful, and some of them took us up on that. 11 students withdrew from the program and 18 were dismissed. And this is for a variety of things like non-engagement. If they just didn't respond and didn't receive a passing grade in any course, they were dismissed. We had some that ran into some academic integrity challenges. Those were the reasons that some students were dismissed. So research question 3 was, what factors predict success during the doctoral program? And so we had 135 participants volunteer for the questionnaire portion, and 90 of those reported finishing the program while 45 did not finish. One person who completed the survey did not provide enough demographic data to be included in that. So we ended up with an analytic sample of 134 students total. So findings for the relationships between some of the variables that we measured, I want to share those with you. So the relationship between age and finishing was not significant. We asked students to give us their age within a 10-year age bracket based on these 10-year age brackets, and so that was not a significant finding. It didn't matter how old or young the students were. They were equally as likely to persist to completion. 12 out of 13, however, of those 20 to 40 years of age completed the program. So within that particular demographic band, that was a pretty large group of completers. So this was the highest of all of the age groups. There was there was a significant association between race, ethnicity, and we grouped those together, and whether a student would finish the program. 74% of white students completed the program. 63% of African American students completed the program, but only 31% of those characterized as other completed the program. There was not a significant association between gender and program completion. Both men and women were able to persist equally. All 6 of the satisfaction items were found to be significantly associated with finishing the degree program. And you can see here in table 3, the item, its chi-square value, the degrees of freedom, and the p-value. So I'll give you a second to look here and see what those were. So we've got the learning contract, the review process, leadership support, dissertation chair, subject matter expert, that was that person I said was the generalist methodological reviewer person, and an expedited review process. We got papers back within a week instead of the 2 weeks to even longer that it was taking in the regular process. So you can see here that students who found these to be important pieces of their journey were much more likely to persist and complete. A logistic regression model was fit to determine the association between variables in finishing the degree program. So we looked at the dichotomous variable outcomes, and we tried to determine which of these variables predicted the outcome. And so I'll give you a moment here to take a look at our logistic regression table here. So you can see here that there are two significant predictors in the logistic regression model, one demographic variable and one learning contract variable. The significant beta for one of the dummy-coded race variables, which was other, which included American Indian, Alaska Native, Hispanic, Latino, or Asian, indicates that being neither white nor African American indicates a negative relationship between being a member of one of those ethnic or racial groups and finishing the program. Another significant predictor was an item on whether or not the learning contract was easy to complete. Given that it's expected that this would be a significant predictor in the model, that respondents who say they've somewhat or strongly agreed that the learning contract was easy to complete would be more likely to finish. So there's something about making that process as easy as possible that is an important predictor. So overall, the findings support the use of learning contracts to increase the rate of milestone progression and overall reduce the likelihood of dropout or lack of completion for these at-risk students. Both the chi-square and the logistic regression models support the consideration of multiple aspects in the successful completion and retention of students in the program. For all ages but one, for the students in the 20 to 39 age combined categories who responded to the questionnaire, there were a much higher percentage of those students actually finished than the other groups. And so it's interesting to consider how age may ultimately help be a success factor for students, and catching them in that 20 to 39-year-old range may maximize the potential for a learning contract program like this. So this program worked well for African American and white students in the survey sample. And we know that any program that helps to promote the diversity of fields of study for African American students is a wonderful and worthy goal. And so we felt like that was a particularly significant contribution of this program. It was helping those students be successful, those African American students who participated. That can promote greater diversity in our fields requiring doctoral degrees. As I noted, there were no significant findings or differences for gender, and so the program worked equally well for men and women. And it's interesting that there were really only those two predictors, ease of learning contract and not being in one of the other demographic categories. So clearly some more research needs to be done in that area, in both of those areas, actually, figure out what does it mean to have an easy learning contract, and why did those other minority students not fare as well as the other white and African American students in the sample. Overall, we saw a huge increase in success rates of these students. As we noted, 82% of the overall student population successfully completed their doctoral degree. There's certainly benefits to the use of a learning contract to help support students in the doctoral process. And this is something that online institutions should consider as a best practice, certainly for at-risk students, but it would be interesting to test this with an overall student population as well to see if similar findings resulted. And so that's really it. We are thrilled to have been able to do this research. We're especially thrilled that this resulted in positive student success for so many of those at-risk students. And if you have any questions at all, I would like to invite you to contact me at melshaw3@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer any questions you have or engage in any conversation you'd like to regarding these findings, and also to connect you with my colleagues who are also involved in this research. Thank you all so much for your time and attention today. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.